Hello everybody, this is Jeff Janess, ready to pick up on the lecture on geoprocessing and automation. And so far we've discussed general geoprocessing. We've just discussed those tools that are available to you. We took a close look at a few of the tools. We've discussed what exactly geoprocessing means in the Esri world, and we've also gone over environments which allow you to run tools in different ways with different parameters. In this video, we're going to look specifically at ModelBuilder. It's a really nice way of stringing tools together such that one tool produces output that serves as input to the next tool. You can run a whole chain of tools at once and save that whole process as if it were a single tool. Now, the term model can mean a lot of different things depending on what you're doing, and in the Esri world, a model is specifically this set of tools that is hooked together so that you can run through the whole sequence. You build this chain of connected tools in this ModelBuilder window, and you get lots of experience with that, but just to give you a quick example. Suppose we have a scenario where we have some roads and we have 4 stands that we're responsible for managing. We'd like to designate a half-mile buffer around a specific set of roads, and we only care about the portion of that buffer that exists within our stands. So in this case, we'd have to go through several steps. First, we'd select the roads we want to buffer, and then we would create a buffer around those roads, and finally, we would clip that buffer to our stand polygons. So it's a 3-step process, and with this example, you honestly could do it just fine running these 3 different tools separately. There's nothing wrong with that. But you could also set up a model in ModelBuilder, which connects all these tools together, and then just run it all at one go. So putting the tools into a model makes a pretty convenient way to run the analysis. It's also a nice way to save the steps that you've done and lets you run it again later. And here's a few more cool things about ModelBuilder. First, it's easy to delete intermediate steps. So that last example, we did 3 steps. We selected some roads, and then we created a buffer around those roads. Then we clipped that buffer to the stands. But that intermediate buffer, that full buffer around all the roads, that might be something we don't really need to keep. All we really needed was the portion of the buffer that was within our management stands, and we got that part with the clip tool. So if you run this analysis as a model, then there's functions that will easily delete that intermediate data set. Second, you can reuse your model over and over again, maybe change a few different parameters each time. You can share your model with a colleague. If you put a lot of work into a process and you think your colleagues could use your process in similar scenarios, you can just send them the model and they can run it themselves. Models make it easy to document the steps you've taken. This is really important at the end of the project when you're writing up what you did and your results. Sometimes it's tough to remember all the steps you took and in the exact order and what parameters you set for each tool. So if you got all these tools stored in a model, then all you have to do is open up the model and you can look at exactly how everything was set up. And finally, it's easy to specify which outputs should be added to your map. In that last example, we did that 3-step process. We created the full buffer, then clipped it. Well, maybe we only want to add that final clipped buffer to the map, and we don't want to add the intermediate full buffer. Well, the model lets us set which data will be added to the map. Now, when you're building these models and you're constructing the sequence of tools and putting them all in order, well, this is actually very similar to writing code. So those of you who are into coding, maybe you do Python or R or C++, well, this will be really familiar to you. It's kind of a visual way of doing it. You're not actually writing anything out, but you do have variables, and you have functions, you have intermediate data sets that get changed and added and deleted through the course of the process. You can also iterate through different features. You can make loops where you're just doing something a certain number of times. And in this sense, it's very similar to a coding language. In this lab, we're going to do some basic models. We're going to use variables, functions, and intermediate data sets. We're not going to do any iterations in this lab. It's just a little more complicated than we want to jump into at this point. So we're just going to cover the basics here. Now, ModelBuilder is sometimes called a visual programming language just because it is so similar to writing code. Now, as a coder myself, I think I'd argue that writing code still gives you a much deeper and more extensive ability to work with data than ModelBuilder, but ModelBuilder is really not bad for what it does. In that last example, we just looked at 3 fairly simple steps in the model, but that's not really where we would normally stop. Many models get much more complicated than that. In this example, this is a model I created to do some point density analysis down in the Barium Goldwater Range near Kingman once upon a time. So there's a lot going on in here, but basically it's calculating point density at various diameters around points. Then it does some statistics on those values, generates some raster outputs, and then it projects the final rasters into some common coordinate system. And the net result of all this was to identify density of water sources down there in the desert. And here's another fun model I did a while back. This one calculates annual and seasonal current speeds using a bunch of ocean data sets. And I just like this model because it looks like a bridge to me. It's just sort of fun to look at. Now, both of these models look like they have a lot of components, a lot going on, but I have a feeling that this level of complexity isn't really that uncommon for models. Most examples of models I see look about as complicated as these, so what you see here are the kinds of things that you should be able to expect to do yourself in ModelBuilder. Anyway, enough examples. Let's look at some actual components of ModelBuilder and understand what's going on in that window. First off, you're going to have 4 different shapes in the window. You got these oval shapes that stand for variables. These could be input data sets. They could be other types of objects. They could just be numbers or text values. And the rectangular objects are tools or processes. Now, in ModelBuilder, they sometimes call these things processes instead of tools, but they're basically tools. The lines are connectors which show how each tool connects to each other, and when a tool produces data, these lines indicate that these data will be used as inputs to the next tool. Then sometimes you see these hexagons, which are iterators. These things loop through objects or ranges of data. For example, they could just run on a counter and do some process over and over again 10 or 20 times, or they could run through every feature in a feature class. They could run through every data set in a workspace. Point is, you can just send it a group of things, and the iterator will do a process to every member of the group. You don't have to build a separate process for each member of that group independently. As I mentioned earlier, in this lab, we're not going to be using iterators, but they are available to you. Okay, now, remember the ovals are variables, but these ovals can come in 4 different colors, and the colors indicate what types of data these variables represent. So a dark blue oval is an actual data set. It's used as an initial input parameter, whereas a green oval is a data set that is produced by a process or a tool. So the blue would be what's going into the process, and the green is what comes out of it. Now these lighter blue colors, these are simply text or numeric values, and that's a different kind of thing than an actual data set. For example, if you had the buffer tool in your model, then remember you have to have a data set to be buffered and a buffer distance. The data set to be buffered would be a dark blue oval because it's a data set. The buffer distance would be this lighter blue oval because it's just a simple number. Buffer feature class being created would be a green oval because it's a data set and it's an output data set from the buffer tool. Okay, here's that model we were looking at earlier, and here we see each component, but I got them labeled so you can see what type of object they are. See, it starts with a blue oval, which is a data set. In this case, it's the Coconino roads. First tool that it reaches is the tool that selects the roads we want to buffer. So you're selecting a particular type of road, which is represented with this green oval. The selection tool also produces a number telling you the number of features selected, and this simple numeric data value is represented by the light blue oval. Now this green data set of selected rows is then used as an input to the buffer tool, which in turn produces a green oval representing the buffer feature class. Now we're going to clip the buffer, so the green oval serves as an input to the clip tool. Clip tool also needs to know what it's using as a clip and boundary, so we give it the Rock Project Unit feature class in this dark blue oval. And once the clip tool finishes, it produces the final derived data set that is the clipped buffer. And now a few more comments about the design of ModelBuilder and the functions inside it. So if the functions are marked with empty gray shapes, like these empty ovals and rectangles, that means the data set or the tool or the variable has been added to the model, but the tool isn't ready to run yet. There are some parameters that have still not been set. If these objects have solid colors within them, well, that means they're ready to run. They have solid colors with little shadow, that means the run has already happened. So when the model is actually running, the two or rectangles turn red as each is in the process of being run. So here are 2 examples of a model. In the top, we've added all the components, but we haven't set any parameters yet, so that model's not yet ready to run. This is apparent to us by the fact that those are all empty gray shapes. In the bottom, we've set several parameters for the first few functions, and those parts are ready to run, but you can see the clip tool has still not had all the parameters set, and so it's not yet ready to run. Here's a full model on top that is fully ready to run, and we can tell because all the colors are filled in. Then after we run the model, then all those objects get little shadows under them, and that indicates the model's complete. When the model's actually running, each tool turns red in its turn. There's a large number of model tools available to you in the ModelBuilder tab in ArcGIS Pro. Especially cool is this auto layout command. I really like that. You can build a really complicated model with all things strung all over the place, and you don't have to worry about organizing it visually yourself. You just hit this auto layout button and it fits it all for you. By the way, this is actually a pretty complicated GIS method that's happening behind the scenes here. It's just happening in graph space instead of on the landscape. And there's several more tools that just affect how the model is drawn in the ModelBuilder window, which affect the aesthetic quality of what you see. These tools are all in the Diagram tab. And you can set individual tool parameters by double-clicking on the tool in the window. You can declare data to be intermediate, meaning that it's only created to serve as inputs to later tools. You don't need to keep it forever in your hard drive. This function gives you an easy way to delete all the datasets created before the final product. And believe me, this ability can be really nice when you have a complex model that may generate hundreds of datasets before it finishes. It means a lot to be able to delete the whole batch just at a single click. And there's also a nice easy way to designate whether any derived dataset should be added to your map. Just right-click on the dataset, go down to Add to Display, and the tool will pop it into your map when it's done. Okay, so far we've been looking at a model in which all the operating parameters are specified in the model itself. And this is fine when we want to build a model that does one very specific task, but it's possible to make your model more generic so that it's actually useful for different scenarios. For example, this model here is specifically designed to select a specific road, Fry Park Road, and buffer it and then clip the buffers to a specific polygon. Now, you construct it and run it right inside the ModelBuilder window. Now, what if the model works well and you want to run it again on different roads? As it stands now, you need to manually change the tool parameters and rerun the model each time. But there is a better way. See, we can set any of these tool parameters to be what we call model level parameters, also known as model variables. When you set these model variables, then you can run the model as a standalone object, just like any other tool. When you double-click on it, ArcGIS will ask you to specify all the model level parameters in a single window, and then ArcGIS will run the model. For example, the first tool in the model is Select Layer by Attribute. It requires you to set the input layer and declare a Select by Attribute SQL query string. The way we've got it coded in the model is to make a new selection of roads named Fry Park. But know that this tool requires an input dataset plus 3 operating parameters. It needs the selection type, the expression, and whether we want to invert that expression. We can set any or all of these 3 parameters, or even the input data itself, to be model level parameters. Now for this example, we'll only make the query expression a model variable. So now the model looks a little different. Notice that the expression has now been separated into a new element, connected with a line to the Select Layer by Attribute tool. If we right-click on this new expression element, we can set it to be a model level parameter. And when we do, we see this letter P appear above the new empty input variable called expression. We also want to make the output feature class a model variable so the user can set it each time. Otherwise, the model right now is written to create a specific output feature class every time, and so that means it just gets overwritten every time. Well, now the model has 2 model level variables, each with this letter P in the upper right corner. And now, when we double-click on the model itself, ArcGIS will ask us to set these 2 parameters before it runs the model. And in this example, I just double-click on the model. It opens up asking me what roads I want to select. Now I say I want the Bob's Tank road, so it goes to work and creates a buffer around those roads. Now there is a fairly decent Esri Virtual Campus course you can take that goes into a little more detail on ModelBuilder than we're going into here. It still doesn't describe iterators, but it does show how you can use a model as a single component inside larger models, which is kind of cool. So far we've been bringing in tools into our model, just finding it in the toolbox, but the models themselves are tools, don't forget, so you can treat them as if they were a tool. So you can insert them into a model just like any other tool. Okay, I think that's enough for now. You get some good practice building this exact model we've been looking at in the lab, so make sure you don't miss out on that. And in the next lecture, I'll introduce you to Python, which is Esri's current language of choice for script-based geoprocessing. And we're not going to learn how to write Python because that is a much bigger topic than we have time for, but we will see how ArcGIS Pro can create little snippets of Python code for us and how these are fairly easy to read and understand. They're also easy to modify and then rerun in ArcGIS Pro's Python window, so we'll give that a try. And in the meantime, thanks so much for listening.